Chapter 900, Self-Recommendation. The abnormality associated with the Berserk Sea is suspected to be a result of the perishing of death. Legend has it that this deity's corpse and items are hidden somewhere in these waters, awaiting someone with a special key to open it. This copper whistle came from Mr. Azek, and Mr. Azek is indeed a direct descendant of death, as well as being from the first or second generation. Therefore, this copper whistle had sensed something or had been influenced. Thoughts flashed across Klein's mind as they coalesced today to form a theory. He planned on finding an inn in Poto Harbor, head above the gray fog, and use dream divination to attempt to obtain a revelation. Then, he would consider the time and method for returning to Eskelsen Harbor. It was to prevent himself from encountering any avoidable accidents. And before that, he needed to seek out food for creeping hunger. After walking down the seaside cliff, Klein entered Poto Harbor. The buildings here were pretty much built anywhere one desired. There was almost zero planning, causing the roads to be very wide or narrow to the point that it only allowed a single-person passage. In certain areas, one couldn't see the sky when looking up, only to see a swath of clothes that were hung up to dry. Wearing a new face, Klein strolled through such an environment with many pedestrians dressed in pirates' attire. He then habitually headed for the bar to seek out prey. At this moment, he saw several people gathered at a notice board on a square up ahead. What's happening? With his curiosity piqued, Klein approached the area. Using his balance and agility as a clown, he passed through the gaps of the crowd before he barely arrived at a spot where he could see the notice board. On the notice board, there was a piece of paper that was overbearing, covering all the other pieces of paper. It was obvious at a glance. Its title was, The Black Emperor's Crew Recruitment. The Black Emperor? Isn't that the ship of King of the Five Seas, Nast? The one that can traverse the spirit world. Considering how he can be considered the king of pirates, he's actually openly recruiting crew members. Klein was rather surprised, as he deliberately spoke out with a suppressed voice. How is that possible? Why not? A stout man beside him, with his arm exposed from his rolled-up sleeves, laughed out loud. It might be impossible in the past, but it's possible now. Why? Klein was hoping that someone would respond. Immediately, he turned his head and asked. The stout man had tattoos all over his arms and cheeks, making him look fierce. Upon hearing that, he pointed at the main sea route's direction and said, A week ago, the Black Emperor and Lone's highly promoted steam ironclad warship, the Pritz, met and clashed in a sea battle. The Black Emperor had many casualties and are in dire need of more manpower. Klein's first reaction was that it didn't make mystical sense. Based on the published content in the papers and the rumors he had heard out at sea, he knew that the Pritz was a warship in the normal sense. It lacked any beyonder elements. Perhaps in terms of physical damage, it was stronger than the Black Emperor, but the latter could use the spirit world to leap, just like a large-sized version of a traveler. There was no ordinary armament that could damage it. Furthermore, King of the Five Seas Nast was likely a Sequence 3 demigod of the Black Emperor Paths of the Divine. He was the most infamous powerhouse at sea. He could directly distort the trajectories of cannonballs, making him nearly invincible when facing a fleet that wasn't in any sense mystical. From Klein's point of view, they were enemies at two completely different levels. Yet, the final outcome was not something he could imagine. He didn't hide his astonishment as he blurted, What about the Pritz? The fierce-looking man shook his head and replied, I'm not too sure, but I heard that it wasn't damaged. Only 2 corvettes were sunk. Klein was first taken aback, before he came to a slight understanding of what happened. He recalled the situation of him robbing the Tutenses II mummy. The military's demigod had used the law that had the power of mysteriousness weakened and the real strengthened. Once this came into effect, the Black Emperor was just a sailboat that was a little special with some extraordinariness. It definitely couldn't beat an ironclad warship. Neither could it flee. This also meant that the Pritz had a demigod existence on the military's side, or else such a law wouldn't have come into effect. To be able to get the Black Emperor to flee under such a situation, King of the Five Seas Nast must be very, very strong. Below angels, he's definitely one of the strongest. From the looks of it, due to the existence of the Arbiter pathway, the trajectory of this world's military development remains close to that of Earth's. It wouldn't reach a point of not being able to defeat a slightly higher-level mysticism opponent. Klein nodded in enlightenment as he didn't inquire further. As for Beyonders below Sequence 4, in a large-scale battle, apart from the few jobs that could take on the role of outputting offensive firepower or carry out effective defenses, the rest could only avoid a direct clash. They would then be the cleanup crew or simply provide support. For example, a marionettist with all his marionettes feared no one in a mid-sequence Beyonder battle if fighting one-on-one. But once he was on a battlefield with shells hurtling everywhere and machine gunfire sweeping the area, the problem of being physically weak became a problem. Even with paper figurine substitutes, one was unable to escape the range of gunfire, thus suffering a second round of damage. Under such situations, it might be too late to use paper figurine substitutes again. In such intense battles, the most effective mid-sequence Beyonders are wraiths. They aren't afraid of cannonballs or bullets, nor are they afraid of being discovered by enemies. Furthermore, they have Shriek, which can affect a huge area. Klein allowed his thoughts to wander when the man from before continued speaking. "You're also thinking of joining the Black Emperor." "I'm still not sure," Klein casually replied. The stout man, who was covered in tattoos, said in excitement, "I have plans on giving it a try anyway. There aren't more than 10 people here who are better at fighting than me here. I have rich experience as a pirate. They'll definitely pick me. However, I won't stay on the Black Emperor for too long. There are too many meaningless rules, such as not being able to plunder or kill defenseless people, or something as silly as not being able to drag a woman you like unless it's mutual. Did you hear that? Is that anything like a pirate? Although the King of the Five Seas is one of the 4 kings and is publicly acknowledged as the Pirate King, those rules are just like dog shit. I'm already used to leading a real pirate's life. I like it that way and will not change. I'm only tempted to join because I heard that it's possible for the Black Emperor crew to obtain supernatural powers. When the time comes, I'll leave and form my own pirate crew." As this man spoke excessively, he suddenly realized the stranger's expression turn a little odd. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" The silver-gray glistening sword slashed down suddenly, pinning down a blank-faced figure to the ground. The figure warped and squirmed and gradually dissipated into illusory blobs of light amidst swirling silver light. Colin Iliad retracted his sword and stood straight up. Observing his surroundings, he saw that Waite and Lovia had separately finished their corresponding targets. A region had been cleanly cleared out by the riverside. At this point, above the illusory, eerie black river, a dark boat cruised over. It silently docked by the bank. Upon seeing this scene, Colin slowly exhaled as he muttered with a solemn expression, "Ferryman." He had spent quite a long amount of time with the former chief, and they knew each other rather well. They both knew that the other was troubled by the City of Silver's absence of the Sequence 3 of the Giant Pathway, Silver Night Potion formula. This prevented people from advancing once they reached the level of a demigod. They had thoughts of switching to a neighboring sequence, and this plan had seen the light of hope during a particular expedition. This was because they found the Sequence 3 potion formula of the Phoenix Pathway, Ferryman. From that moment forth, the former chief began building the mausoleum and eventually took up residence inside before sealing the entrance. Observing silently with dark green symbols in his eyes, Colin Iliad said heavily, "Let's cross the river on the boat." Waite and Lovia didn't express any objections, fully trusting the chief's judgment. They followed closely behind him and boarded the dark and strange boat. During this process, the 3 didn't show any hesitation or observe their surroundings, nor did they pause. It was as though this wasn't an exploration, but a visit with a destination in mind. The boat slowly began moving across the ink-black water surface, leaving a long trail in its wake. The bloody arms and the slimy tentacles wildly reached upwards and slammed into the boat, but they failed to leave any marks. They failed to leave any influence. In just over 10 seconds, the 3 elders of the 6-member council arrived on the other bank of the illusory river. There was an altar there, with a heavy, iron-black coffin placed on it. Colin Iliad immediately jumped off the boat and reached out for his other sword. Like before, he appeared cautious, not underestimating anything. Following that, Waite held his iron-gray hammer and landed heavily on the bank. He left the surrounding soil quaking in an obvious manner. He looked at the monster skull that embraced the gigantic coffin, took 2 steps, and placed the hammer in front of him. He then removed the dragon's slaying bow behind him. At this point, Waite suddenly felt the back of his palm itching. He subconsciously looked down and saw that his hair follicles had fine white hair stained with yellowish oil growing from within as they grew in size. Poto Harbor. After Klein fed creeping hunger and found a rowdy inn, he got a room that could barely be considered clean. Then he took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray fog. Sitting in the fool's chair, Klein first picked up the projection of Azek's copper whistle and conjured a pen and paper before writing a corresponding divination statement. The reason for this copper whistle's abnormality today.